We're counting down the 10 dumbest Wild West facts everyone still believes, but are totally fake. From outlaws you think ruled the frontier to legendary showdowns that almost never happened, these myths reveal how Hollywood rewrote American history. Which tall tale tops the list? Let's dive in. Shootouts on Main Street are the Wild West's most stubborn myth, but the numbers tell a different story. Dodge City, during its so-called wildest years, from 1876 to 1885, recorded just 5 deaths from shootouts. Tombstone, famous for the OK Corral, saw 8 murders between 1880 and 1882. Most towns passed strict gun ordinances. Dodge City banned sidearms inside city limits, while Tombstone required every visitor to check their weapons at a hotel, saloon, or the sheriff's office. Lawmen enforced these rules with fines and arrests. The real danger wasn't bullets, but disease. Typhoid and cholera outbreaks killed far more people than gunfights ever did. Tumbleweeds rolling across empty prairie look like they've always belonged to the American West, but the truth is, they're recent invaders. The plant behind the legend, Russian thistle, or Salsola tragus, hitched a ride to the U.S. in the 1870s, mixed in with flax seeds from Ukraine and Russia. The first American tumbleweed was recorded in South Dakota in 1873. Within 2 decades, these prickly balls had spread from the Dakotas to Texas, bouncing across the plains and crowding out native plants. By the 1920s and 30s, filmmakers grabbed the image for instant atmosphere. One tumbleweed rolling down a dusty street, and the audience knew it was the West. But this so-called symbol of frontier emptiness is actually an invasive species from the other side of the world, made famous not by cowboys, but by Hollywood's need for a cheap, dramatic prop. Cowboys rarely chased outlaws or lived the adventure-packed lives found in dime novels. Most were hired hands earning $25 to $40 a month in the 1880s, working long days herding cattle, repairing fences, and branding livestock. Payroll records and cattle logs show they spent 12 to 15 hours a day in the saddle, often under a relentless sun or driving rain. Cattle drives stretched for 3 or 4 months, covering up to 1,500 miles from Texas to Kansas railheads. The job was dirty, dangerous, and grinding. Broken bones, snake bites, and stampedes were far more common than gunfights. At the height of the cattle boom, only 5,000 to 10,000 cowboys worked the open range, a small number compared to the myth. The image of a cowboy as a heroic lawman grew out of cheap paperbacks and traveling shows, but real cowboys were laborers, not legends. Straight whiskey served neat sounds tough, but most frontier saloons couldn't afford that luxury. The typical glass of whiskey was watered down, sometimes by half, or cut with whatever was handy: turpentine, ammonia, even a pinch of gunpowder for extra kick. Complaints in period newspapers called it 40-rod lightning, a warning that the drink might knock you flat before you reach the next mile marker. A shot cost 10 to 25 cents, which translates to $3 to $7 today, but quality was never guaranteed. Beer, usually shipped in barrels and served at room temperature, became the safer bet. With clean water scarce, even a weak beer was less risky than whatever passed for whiskey behind the bar. Hollywood stuck with whiskey bottles in the movies. They catch the light better than cloudy beer mugs. But in real frontier saloons, the average customer was just hoping not to go blind. Wanted posters promising big rewards and justice at any cost are a Hollywood staple. But the real notices told a different story. Most simply said "wanted," without dramatic threats or the words "dead or alive." Typical rewards ranged from $50 to $500, enough to tempt, but hardly the fortune movies suggest. The largest payout on record was $10,000 for train robber Reuben Houston Burrow in 1890, a rare exception. Killing a wanted man could land a civilian in court for murder, unless the law gave clear authority. Printing and distributing posters was expensive, so sheriffs used them sparingly, relying more on the telegraph and railroad to spread the word. The dead or alive phrase spread because it looked good in dime novels and silent films, not because it filled the walls of frontier towns. The truth behind the wanted poster is less about shootouts and more about paperwork and legal caution. Stagecoach robberies fill Western movies, but company records tell a different story. Between 1870 and 1884, Wells Fargo counted just 347 robbery attempts across the entire West. Fewer than half of those succeeded, and losses added up to less than 1% of all cargo transported. After the Transcontinental Railroad opened in 1869, banks and gold shipments moved by train, not stagecoach, making big hauls even rarer targets. By the late 1870s, guards armed with shotguns rode alongside drivers, and security measures kept most would-be bandits at bay. Hollywood kept the holdup alive for drama, but real ledgers show stagecoach robbery was more legend than daily threat. The numbers don't lie. For every daring heist on screen, hundreds of coaches rolled through safely, their cargo and passengers untouched. Roping wild horses with a lasso looks thrilling on screen, but it's mostly a Hollywood invention. By the 1870s, nearly every horse on the range was already domesticated or bred on ranches. True wild herds were rare, often just strays or animals that had escaped captivity. Cowboys used lassos for cattle work, herding, branding, and catching runaways, not for taming Mustangs. When ranchers needed to capture horses, they relied on corrals, water traps, and slow, patient taming that could take weeks. The image of a cowboy swinging a rope from horseback to subdue a wild stallion took off with Buffalo Bill's Wild West shows, which started touring in 1883. These traveling spectacles staged dramatic horse chases and bronco-busting acts, turning a tough, everyday job into a crowd-pleasing stunt. The real work was less about daring catches and more about steady hands and long days on the open range. Batwing doors swinging in the breeze might be the most recognizable image from Western movies, but real saloons rarely used them. Most bars and gambling halls in Dodge City, Tombstone, and Abilene had solid, full-length doors. These kept out dust storms, prairie winds, and winter chill, practical needs for the frontier. The half doors, when they did appear, were a Southern invention, first documented in New Orleans before the Civil War, and used mainly for ventilation in sweltering heat. Hollywood set designers in the 1930s and 40s chose batwing doors for a different reason. They made it easy for cameras to catch dramatic entrances and barroom brawls without blocking the view. Studio manuals even recommended them for quick filming. In reality, the classic saloon entrance was more about keeping the weather out than letting trouble stroll in. Painted faces and bodies in native communities carried meanings far beyond battle. Among the Cheyenne, certain colors and designs appeared during the sun dance, a sacred ceremony, or to mark a period of mourning. Lakota families painted infants red for protection and honored the dead with black or white paint, each shade tied to clan, prayer, or loss. Apache traditions reserved paint for healing rituals, puberty ceremonies, or invoking blessings, rarely for war. Each tribe guarded its own symbols and colors, often passed down through generations. As Cheyenne oral historians explain, paint was applied at sacred moments, not as routine preparation for conflict. Early Western entertainment twisted these traditions into a single stereotype, ignoring their diversity and sacredness. For Native peoples, body paint was a living art, personal, spiritual, and deeply tied to identity, not a Hollywood prop for danger or threat. Was the Wild West really as lawless as legend claims? Frontier towns moved fast to build order. By the late 1860s, new mining camps set up claim courts and elected judges within weeks of a gold strike. Body, California, often called a den of outlaws, recorded about one murder per year from 1877 to 1883, with a population between 5,000 and 7,000. That's lower than many modern cities. Vigilance committees formed in places where courts lagged, stepping in to settle disputes and keep the peace. Federal marshals patrolled vast territories, and municipal ordinances banned weapons inside town limits. Many towns borrowed legal systems from earlier Mexican alcaldía courts and indigenous councils, blending old and new rules to fit the frontier. The so-called Wild West era stretched just 30 years, from 1865 to 1895, and was shaped by a patchwork of laws, not the chaos Hollywood loves to show. Hollywood needed drama, so it invented a West where every argument ended in a duel. In reality, the safest bet was to hand over your gun and hope you didn't catch a fever. From the myth of constant street shootouts to the shocking truth that tumbleweeds are not even native to the West, these 10 entries reveal just how deeply Hollywood has shaped and distorted our view of frontier life. Across the entire list, a clear pattern emerges. Nearly every iconic image, from half-swinging saloon doors to stagecoach holdups, was either exaggerated or entirely invented for dramatic effect. The most surprising facts, like strict gun laws in Dodge City and the monotonous, underpaid reality of cowboy labor, show that the real West was far less wild and far more orderly than legend suggests. Each entry qualified for this ranking by exposing a widely believed falsehood, backed by hard statistics and historical records. When we peel back the myths, we see a diverse and complex world driven by hard work, law, and adaptation, not chaos and violence. Ultimately, the true story of the Wild West is richer and more surprising than any movie script.